what's up? I'm Colleen and welcome to my channel. I've never met a sparkle that I didn't like and a bully that I did, because being mean is not cool. Awesome people are not mean, so be kind all the time. So welcome to another episode of Friday Frights. For this episode, I thought I would talk about screaming skulls. I'd never actually heard of screaming skulls before, which is interesting because there seems to be like a lot of stories about them, although they do tend to take place in England, but a lot of ghost stories happen in England. So when I'm researching stuff or just reading stuff in general, because let's be honest, I like to read stuff about the paranormal, a lot of it does take place in England. So I'm really surprised I had never seen this before. When I was just researching the paranormal, like I always do, I came across screaming skulls and I was like, this is such a perfect topic to talk about for Friday Frights. Before I continue, I just wanted to let people know I'm actually going to do a revamp of Friday Frights a little bit. I'm actually going to separate the makeup part of Friday Frights from Friday Frights, and Friday Frights is going to be just talking about everything that goes bump in the night, and I will no longer be doing it as a makeup tutorial slash story time type of thing. I love the paranormal and I love makeup, and I really wanted to combine the two, but I never found a way that meshed them together that was comfortable for me, that I really felt flowed together and really worked well for me. Like, I wanted to be more involved in the story and I wanted to be involved in doing my makeup, and I never felt like I was able to do both equally. So I've decided to separate them. So if you are interested in how I got this look, this is going to be posted in a separate video on my channel. I'm always going to be doing that now. And Friday Frights are just going to be for some fun, scary stories, because I do love the paranormal. Mythical and earthly and makeup will always stay mythical and earthly and makeup. But I just figured I would get that out of the way. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into talking about screaming skulls. Origins are in England, dating back to the 17th century. Screaming skulls are ghosts in or attached to human skulls that haunt a location, most commonly places in England. Most often, these spirits seem to be attached to their homes and will exhibit poltergeist or ghostly behaviors when removed. Some behaviors these skulls will exhibit are screams, weeps, and or moans until they are put back where they want to be or requested to be before they passed away. Now, if skulls weren't creepy enough for you, can you imagine having a skull that just started screaming? Like, bones and skulls are kind of creepy anyway, but like one that just like makes noise. Can you imagine? Like, that would have scared the heck out of me, absolutely, for sure. When I was doing my research on screaming skulls, there were like a few repeat like stories. Although there are definitely more stories about screaming skulls, these were the stories that kept popping up the most in different articles that I was reading about screaming skulls, and I was doing my research for this episode. So I thought that I would include the next few stories about the screaming skulls, just because I thought it was really interesting and it really gives you an idea of why they became known as the screaming skulls and what their reasoning is and all that. The first skull is the Petiscom skull. Its location is near Lyme Regis, Dorset, England. In the 17th century, Azariah Pinney brought a slave to his home, Petiscom Manor, after traveling for the English Civil War. The slave died under mysterious circumstances, and he requested that his body be returned to his homeland in the West Indies. His request was ignored, and he was buried in a local graveyard. Screams were heard coming from his grave. Repeated attempts to dig up his body and bury it elsewhere were met with the same angry screams. His skull was then moved to Petiscom Manor. However, it should be noted that Professor Gilbert Causey of the Royal College of Surgeons concluded that the skull belonged to a prehistoric woman in her 20s. The skull still remains at the manor today, just in case the professor was wrong. Although it wasn't the West Indies, being at the manor seems to keep the skull happy. The Burton Agnes skull. Location, Driffield in the East Riding of Yorkshire, England. Burton Agnes Hall was built in 1598 during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I by three sisters of the Griffith family. The youngest, Sister Anne, was attacked by robbers near her home. They beat her when she refused to give them her mother's ring. Townspeople heard her cries and rescued her and returned her home. She sadly died 5 days later. On her deathbed, she requested that her head be placed within the walls of the manor. The family ignored this, and shortly after she was buried and the house's construction complete, her sisters began hearing noises throughout the house. Anne's sisters returned to the family burial vault to undo their mistake. Anne's body was completely intact, but her head was separated and placed away from her body. Some stories even claim that her head was grinning. The head was taken back to Burton Agnes Hall, and the noises stopped. However, the noises would happen again when later residents tried to remove the skull. Although the noises have stopped in recent years, Anne will sometimes make a ghostly appearance on the anniversary of her death. I thought the one was, I mean, they're all really interesting, but I thought this one was really interesting. I want to look more into about the haunting of Burton Agnes Hall, just because I want to know about her apparition and like how it appears and how often it appears, if there's other ghosts there. I think that would be something more, like something I'd want to look into further, which I think I might. The Calgary Hall Skull, Windermere, Cumbria, England. Miles Phillipson, a justice of the peace, owned Calgary Hall and a lot of land. He was greedy and wanted more land and pursued the property of a young couple who refused to give up their home. Phillipson hid one of his silver cups in the couple's home and told authorities the couple stole from him, and they were then arrested. Since he was a justice of the peace, they were found guilty and sentenced to the gallows. On the scaffold, the young woman uttered a curse to the Phillipson family. Shortly after their execution, 2 skulls appeared in Calgary Hall. They screamed loud every night. Although they were moved from the property, they always managed to come back. Phillipson also faced many hardships after the death of the couple. The skulls were eventually boarded up in the walls of the house. I thought that story was actually really kind of like sad, because he was so greedy and so awful, and he basically just pushed aside this couple to get their land, and I think it's sad that that happened. I just thought that one was, yeah, that one was a little bit sadder than the other ones, but I think he totally got what he deserved with being haunted, and then his family had hardships afterwards, because when you're greedy, you get none. The Theophilus Brome Skull, Tunstead Milton, Derbyshire, England. Theophilus Brome was a local man who requested to have his head buried in his farmhouse, apart from his body. His fellow villagers followed his request, but someone later tried to remove the skull. The villagers heard piercing screams and quickly returned the skull to the farmhouse. In later years, villagers tried to remove the skull again, only to have their spades split in 2 when digging it up. The Tunstead Farm Skull, Chapel on Firth, England. This skull, nicknamed Dickie, was kept on a windowsill, and its origins are unknown. It could be the skull of a woman who was murdered in the very room it resides, or it could be Ned Dixon, an ancestor of the farmhouse. No one knows for sure. The skull is said to serve as guardian of the house, making noises whenever strangers are present. Dickie has also alerted residents to births or illnesses of farm animals, and even warned of the coming death of a family member. According to legend, robbers tried to steal Dickie, but returned them after the skull incessantly screamed. So those are the stories on the Screaming Skull, and that's everything I have on Screaming Skulls for you today. I will of course have all the sources that I used listed in the description below, so if you want to check them out, feel free to. So what do you guys think of Screaming Skulls? Have you ever heard of them before? Would they scare you? Would you just be like, whatever? I just thought it was really, really interesting. If you look online, I believe there are pictures of some of the skulls. I'm not sure if they're all the ones I talked about. There might be 1 or 2. That are like still in the house. I don't know. One I think is like open to the public. I think one of them isn't. I'm not sure. But if you look at some of the articles that I'll list below, you might be able to actually see a picture of some of the skulls. It's just really interesting. It's also interesting that the stories seem to take place just in England and not in other places. So it fascinates me that for some reason like this legend just is tied to like English folklore. So if you ever encountered a screaming skull, what would you do? How would you react? How would you feel? I would try and figure out where it wants to be and why it's screaming, and I would be very sorry that I disrespected it, or whoever disrespected it, because you just don't disrespect the dead. You just don't do that. That's not cool. So anyway, that is all I have for you today. So anyway, my celestial cupcakes, if you like this video, please feel free to give it a like. If you really, really like this video, please feel free to subscribe. If you want to do neither one of those things, that's cool. And I still thank you so much for stopping by and spending this minute with me. I really, really appreciate it. I will still send you tons of happy thoughts and positive vibes your way just for stopping by. So thank you. As always, I will have everything that I am wearing on my face, as well as my Twitter and Instagram handles listed below, in case you'd like to follow me there. I post pictures of looks that I do not film, as well as pictures of my pets, because I think they are adorable. But of course, we are all biased when it comes to our fur babies, but oh well. So anyway, friend one, makeup lover to another, I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and always stay gay. Remember, be you, do you, love you. Bye!